Welcome to CyberCast, decoding today's cyber issues. I'm Alexander Bolova, production lead at GovCIO Media and Research. With me today is staff writer-researcher Sylvia Oakland. Hi, Sylvia.
Hey, Alex. Good to be back.
You had the opportunity to chat with Jimmy Hall, CIO and Director of the Technology and Innovation Office at the Bureau of Intelligence and Research in the State Department. How'd it go?
It was a really great conversation, Alex. So Mr. Hall just recently passed his 1 year and 6 month mark. He started in January 2023 in this position. And so we really just had an in-depth conversation about what the intelligence and research, what their strategic plan for the upcoming years kind of look like. You know, talking about the 5 goals that they had set in place, especially focusing on the cloud, that digital transformation, and then things like DevSecOps.
So tell me more about the role that IT plays at the State Department.
Yeah, so when Mr. Hall and I had started talking, the international strategy for digital policy had not been released yet, but it is a really important thing. And I think the biggest thing that they talked about is in regards to upskilling their workforce and kind of using that emerging technology, using AI, and encouraging the workforce to use that. We hear a lot that workforce is kind of the backbone, and they are, and upskilling them is extremely important. So they're really focusing on the technology, but also focusing on something that we hear a lot is people and process. So that people, process, and technology is really something that they're trying to incorporate in order to reach all of their strategic goals.
Well, let's not keep our audience waiting. Let's take a listen to your conversation. This episode is brought to you by CDW. As application and operational requirements continue to evolve, traditional methods of delivering applications and the platforms needed to run those applications are exponentially increasing in cost and complexity. CDW Government brings cutting-edge services and solutions that will evaluate and transition your legacy systems to cost-effective, modern, compliant, and secure systems. Contact your account team or email tellmemore@cdwg.com to learn how we can transform your agency.
Good morning, Mr. Hall. Thank you so much for joining me here on GovCast today.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
So first, Mr. Hall, I'd like to start by hearing a little bit more about your experience and your role at the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research.
So good. So I've been here around 16 months. I came over from the Department of Defense, and my primary role here as the CIO is to oversee all of the highly classified and top secret networks, systems, and equipment for the department. In addition to that, I oversee the cybersecurity and insider threat aspects of those same systems, networks, and equipment. Prior to arrival here, I was able to spend about 5 years in DCSA, the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, and prior to that, around 30 years in the Army. And so I want to say, first of all, that the INR main mission is to provide intelligence support to diplomats. In fact, we're the only IC element dedicated exclusively to supporting the American diplomacy, especially important given the current world environment. So what we aim to do at INR is deliver and coordinate timely and objective intelligence that advances U.S. diplomacy. And so the mission of the TIO, which is the Technology and Innovation Office, is to provide the very fabric of the technology background to support how we deliver intelligence to advance U.S. diplomacy, specifically focused on the TS-SCI network.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about INR's strategic plan for 2025. 2 of the 5 goals are really focused on cybersecurity and digital transformation. And last year, you said that the migration was about 30% in the cloud. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit of how that migration process looks now.
Yeah, so thanks. So first of all, I'm very proud of the work that the team has put in. And so last year, we introduced a cloud strategy roughly April of last year. And then shortly thereafter, we introduced an implementation plan. And I've gone around now and talked to folks about, hey, we're about 30% in the TS cloud. And if I were to take a step back, I was given basically 4 objectives when I arrived. Objective number 1 was to expand our TS SCI connectivity. Objective number 2 was to strengthen our cybersecurity posture. Objective number 3, which we're talking about now, was move into a TS cloud adoption framework. And then lastly was just to improve the user experience. So specifically focused on the cloud. We've gone through the IT community's C2E cloud construct. We have an agreement with AWS, and we're still roughly 30 to 35% into the cloud. As we move forward, my intent is to deploy a hybrid cloud approach, and hybrid in terms of a multi-cloud approach, and hybrid in terms of a multiple cloud approach. And so I'm only in the early stages just because as we chart our way through other cloud service providers and how we can align our workflows to better support our cloud adoption environment, but also ensure the reliable and availability and confidentiality of the information and data that will traverse the networks that I manage. Also, I would like to say that the progress continues. We're doing a lot of foundational work today behind the scenes. We've been given some non-discretionary mandates that we must meet in terms of strengthening cybersecurity, which aligns with our cloud posture. But also, I've been given some non-discretionary mandates about modernization efforts. And so we're charting our path slowly but deliberately, and we have a methodology here that ultimately, roughly a year and a half from now, we'll have the cloud presence that we aim for here in the Department of State.
That's wonderful to hear. And it sounds like you are making great progress. And you mentioned this a little bit in that earlier response, but I want to also ask, how is the digital transformation process as a whole going on? You mentioned things like human-centered design. And while I was looking through the strategic plan, kind of focusing on DevSecOps and technology governance board. So I was wondering if you could touch on that.
So in terms of how it's going, I would characterize it as that we're making great progress. And as I said earlier, 16 months on the job, we're squarely focused on digital transformation and strengthening cybersecurity. As you allude to, our 2025 plan has 5 goals. 2 of those 5 goals align to what we're doing in my wheelhouse. We've established an ongoing governance presence now that we didn't have. And so now we've actually had 4 to 5 enterprise level governance boards focused on IT. We've now modernized our Microsoft Exchange environment from a digital transformation perspective. And we've also increased our budget. But our budget has increased for a number of reasons. We've had some instances where we've had an event or 2 in the State Department that has allowed us to ask for and increase our funding. We've had external OIG come in and take a look at our networks, and we've been able to increase funding because of that. And then we conducted an internal security review last summer where we came up with several findings and recommendations that allowed us to also expand our budget. And so from a digital transformation perspective, we're making great progress in terms of resourcing, great progress in terms of digital transformation and modernizing our network, and then great progress in terms of strengthening our cybersecurity. What's left to do, and you touched on this when you talked about human-centered design, is we need to integrate ourselves better from a user experience perspective. And so going forward, in addition to all the things that I just mentioned, part of my focus will be on understanding the user experience and ensuring that we improve the user experience. Those requirements that come in cannot be technology driven. It has to be driven by the business, and it has to be driven by the enterprise, and it has to be driven by those requirements. And then we need to align how we enable the business success through technology, and user experience is one way to get after that.
That's wonderful to hear. The next thing I'd like to kind of talk about is the cybersecurity aspect, and specifically that third strategic goal. It says, establish effective governance and update policies, standards, and procedures to manage cyber risk throughout the enterprise. So I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of insight as to what the policies are currently looking like for INR.
So just as I said earlier on cloud adoption, we created a strategy and implementation plan We also conversely created a cybersecurity strategy and a cybersecurity implementation plan. So that's moving well as well. Some of it's based on opportunities I mentioned earlier, and some of it's the fact that before I arrived, this bureau didn't have a chief information security officer. So about 4 months before my arrival, we actually selected one, and so he and I started at the same time. So not only did we not have a CISO, we have a CISO now. We also have monthly forums where we are taking a look at our TS/SCI fabric in terms of authority to operate, in terms of accreditation. And then we've also taken advantage of the previous opportunities that I mentioned, and we purchased software that will allow us to automate some of our monitoring capabilities and improve our ability to protect the data and information that goes across our networks. And overlay with our governance, our monthly governance approach. And we've made great success. And I'm not sitting here saying that we were not meeting the cybersecurity standards that's been levied against us. We want to get to a position where we've overachieved in cybersecurity and in terms of cybersecurity compliance. The internal security review that I mentioned last summer, the 60-day internal security review, those findings and recommendations that we covered have been implemented, except for onesies and twosies. So that's improved our cybersecurity environment. So I'm very pleased at where we are. The OIG that I talked about earlier has given us an opportunity to further strengthen and fortify our cybersecurity environment. We can only build going forward. And one of the ways that I like to build going forward is to ensure a multi-level governance framework. And when I say multi-level governance framework, then we need to move from smaller enterprise resource review boards to a larger, broader enterprise IT review board to even a more broader cross-bureau IT governance board, which is something that we're most proud of. And as I said earlier, we've had about 5 or 6 of those sessions now at the enterprise level. So we're making the progress to ensure that we are able to advance intelligence to support American diplomacy one day at a time, one step at a time, but globally for the department.
There's nothing wrong in my books with being an overachiever, especially when it comes to the cybersecurity realm. So I'm really glad to hear that. Mr. Hall, I'm coming up here on my last question, and many agencies are discussing the best ways that they can upskill their workforce, whether it's, in regards to AI or other emerging technology that's coming out. And I'm assuming that it's no different for INR. So how are you encouraging training or other resources to educate the INR workforce?
Yeah, so I would agree. It's no different in INR than it is for any office or shop, right? Especially those that are focused on technology and innovation as my team is. And so training and upskilling our workforce is a top priority for us. And we got to stay competitive, and we're focusing on emerging technologies and how we use them. We have a couple of agreements with external industry partners that I like to fortify. We've now encouraged our workforce to go out and recertify their certificates and to also learn about emerging technologies, not just AI, but think in terms of quantum as well. We like to strengthen our partnerships with industry and academic institutions. We're writing now and drafting plans to do that, to ensure that we remain on the cutting edge when it comes to training and resources. And overall, holistically, we're focused on providing, education for our workforce in general beyond the IT space, because an educated workforce on the possibilities and the realm of possibilities on emerging technologies can only ensure success when it comes to intelligence, for sure, in terms of analysts and the work that we do behind the scenes, but also from a technology. So we're proud of where we are. We have some work to do in terms of upskilling our workforce. And also it's a mandate, given our current environment, both internationally, also conflicts that are going on, but also budgetarily. We're not going to grow at enormous paces at this point. So we got to rely on upskilling current workforce. It's a priority of ours.
Mr. Hall, thank you so much for joining me today here on GovCast. I really appreciate your time and hearing what is going on over at INR. It's truly amazing, and I'm so glad to hear that you are all making the progress that you want to see, and that, hopefully in a few more months we'll be able to hear more from you guys.
So thank you for having me. But just in closing, just let me highlight, a couple of days ago, our secretary spoke at RSA conference in San Francisco about technology and about the transformation of foreign policy, emphasizing choices we make in this decisive decade that will reverberate, we know, for generations to come. So we're happy and proud to be a part of that. And at the end of the day, our motto, which is intelligence, empowering diplomacy, is our goal. It's our North Star. And we'll continue to remain focused on it and getting after it. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sylvia. That was a great chat that you had with Jimmy Hall. Before we let our listeners go, are there any last highlights or takeaways that you want to leave them with?
I think that the State Department is, in general, something that everyone should really be keeping an eye on. Mr. Hall and I didn't get a chance to talk about the international digital policy and strategy, but there's a lot of interesting and really resourceful information coming out of the State Department on how they're managing, again, the workforce, whether it's upskilling or just kind of reinforcing what they need to know, looking at those policy standards and cybersecurity as a whole. So I really think everyone should kind of just keep the State Department in their back pocket when it comes to things that they should be looking at.
Definitely. And I really am interested, as we continue to cover the State Department, how cloud is playing such a big role, especially when you have American diplomats spread literally around the world, and how you keep them all connected and secured really is a priority and something I personally find very fascinating. So we look forward to keeping up with both the State Department and Jimmy Hall. But in the meantime, that's all for today's CyberCast. If you like what you heard, make sure you leave a review and a 5-star rating on the podcast platform of your choice. And hey, tell a friend. We always appreciate growing our audience. I'm Alexander Bolova.
And I'm Sylvia Oakland.
Thank you for listening. CyberCast, along with GovCast and HealthCast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. To explore our content, visit our website, govciomedia.com. Keep an eye out for new episodes every Tuesday. And if you like what you heard, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. Have a topic you want us to discuss? Contact us at newsletter@govcio.com.